I know I'm paralyzed by it. I like to be my old self again. Hi.
How you doing, Sania?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Yeah, same.
So, as you know, or I think you know, I've been interviewing a lot of former students and just other adults in specific or unique professions, and I've basically just been asking the question of what they wish they would have learned in school. So, I'm going to ask you the same question, whether it was with me or with anyone else throughout your educational experience, something that you wish you would have learned more about. So, how would you answer that question?
So I probably wish I learned more about how to overcome failure. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so failure is obviously inevitable. It happens to everyone. And I feel like the school system kind of discourages failure, especially with the grading system. We're letter graded based on our performance, right? So
Right.
I feel like it honestly almost encourages perfection,
Mm,
and it instills this fear of failure in a lot of young kids. So um, I feel like it's something that's very important to be able to handle when you grow up, and I feel like especially at a young age, we need to learn how to overcome this.
definitely.
So maybe some sort of systems they can implement to encourage more of progress and growth and improvement rather than encouraging perfection. So, like
Mm,
for example, on Power School, if you get, let's say you start off the school year and you get a really bad grade, and then you feel discouraged, and a lot of kids would be more inclined to just drop out of the class rather than trying to really improve. So maybe if they implement some sort of system that kind of encourages progress, I feel like we would learn so much more and be able to grow so much more.
I definitely agree with that. I think that's a systemic problem or a systemic challenge for sure, because then people would counter that with, well, then how do you assess or how do you motivate or how do you provide students with some type of measurement of like how they're doing in comparison to other students? So do you have any like idea of or suggestions for, instead of grades, then to show growth, how we can measure that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember in elementary school, the teachers would like kind of have conferences with the parents and they would talk about like the students' progress. So even just something like that, honestly. And I understand like teachers have hundreds of kids now, because it's not just one class.
Right.
Um, but maybe some sort of honestly like report on how the student is improving and progressing throughout the year, because I feel like that could also encourage someone.
So
Like for
providing
example,
more feedback as opposed to verbally, as opposed to giving it a number or a letter grade.
yeah, because I feel like students can be easily discouraged by just seeing like a number on a screen.
Counter argument I hear a lot is, well, then does that prepare students for the real world? Real world. And the reason I put that in quotes is because your world is also the real world. It's just different than maybe what you'll face later on. That's always an expression I always thought was an odd expression, because it's not that you're
Yeah.
preparing for some alternate, different real world. It's still the same world.
Hmm.
It's just that you're at a different stage. And so, do you feel like if, let's say, we took out the grading system and we provided alternative ways of providing feedback, whether verbally with conferences, written feedback, whatever it may be, do you think that will kind of ill prepare you for your future then? Where if you're in a job or if you're in a profession where there are going to be reviews and there are going to be measures taken that you will have to be able to handle, and if you have not been assigned a grade or a number or kind of a judgment before that, do you think it would be even harder to process later on?
I feel like I'm not saying to remove the grading system. I feel like it's still important,
Mhm.
um, but maybe being a little bit more like lenient with,
Mm,
um, and obviously also including like some sort of a progress report, and like a teacher's comment. I feel like would be more encouraging.
right.
Like, oh, the student had a rough start, but they're doing so much better now and they're improving so much. That could just be really nice for someone to hear. And also, I feel like, so, yeah, there are job reports and everything when you grow up, but I feel like we're not graded on life. Like, we're not actually
Mm.
given a letter grade for how we're doing in life.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're not given a letter grade for how you are as a person. But I feel like, in general, people should really more strive more for progress and growth and being their best self rather than being honestly perfect.
100% agree. Where do you think failure, the idea of failure being a bad thing, starts for us as humans? Because this is not something that started in the classroom. You know, we enter classrooms with that notion already in place. So where do you think the concept of failure and that it's a bad thing starts?
I feel like humans strive for comfort. Like we're told from a very young age that we have to get an education, go to college, get a good job, and have a family and live a comfortable life. But I feel like a lot of times you can't really grow and improve from being comfortable. But then the feeling of being uncomfortable is like so scary, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously everyone wants to be in their comfort zone. Everyone wants to live life in the easiest way possible, right? So I feel like, and then it does, I guess, start from honestly letter grades. Like the letter grade F, it stands for failure, and kids just are kind of taught to be almost scared of it, rather than seeing it as a motivator, so that they can, be encouraged to improve.
The other thing that I find interesting with grading in general is that we are assigning numbers and letters, which thereby, again, as you're saying, motivates students in a particular way within certain subjects, math, science, language arts, social studies, whatever it may be. But it's interesting because when it comes to like morality or being a good person or being a kind person, like you're saying, there's no real grade for that. But what are your thoughts on that being something that should actually be what's being encouraged and kind of checked? And I know that's hard because it's subjective and it depends on the teacher and who gets to say what's good and what's bad. Do you feel like as a 10th grader in 2022, like that's something that's lacking?
Yeah, so I feel like, honestly, with the grading system, I feel like kids are a lot more competitive.
Hmm.
So they're mainly focused towards achieving those grades and achieving really results rather than being a good person. And again, there's like no way for anyone to grade how you are as a person.
Hmm.
But I think that's why the letter grades are not, because they really only assess you on your skills or how you prepared for a particular assessment.
Right.
So that's why I feel like they're not the most effective, because then kids are more inclined to focus more on things like that, on improving or on getting results rather than how they are as a person.
Right. And also the process of learning as opposed to just the result.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
reading a book right now, actually. We're actually doing a book club, some of the teachers, and it's called Grading Smarter, Not Harder. And it's really interesting that you bring this up right now because the book is actually about how we put too much emphasis on grades and how that doesn't actually always reflect what the student knows. It just might reflect how much family support they have. It might reflect the pressures they have. It might reflect that they're really good at doing homework, but doesn't necessarily mean that they've comprehended the concept beyond that particular assignment. And
Hmm.
that just because a student is not doing their work, it doesn't imply that they don't know. And that, for example, if you didn't do your homework and I put in a 0 because you didn't do the homework, that doesn't tell. A 0 indicates that you had zero understanding of what was completed. But the truth is, probability wise, you probably would be closer to like a 50 or 60%, which is actually more accurate than putting in a 0. 0 just means you didn't do it. Maybe that's organization issues. Maybe that's supervision at home. Maybe you got were distracted with a family problem or, whatever it may be, but it's not an actual reflection of what the student may know.
Hmm.
So I definitely agree with that. But I think the struggle has always been, well, then what do we do instead? I think it makes people uncomfortable too, because that's all we've ever known. It's like a security blanket.
Yeah.
Could you ever imagine a world where a world where there were just no grades and it was just conversation?
I know some other countries actually have uh, school systems that focus less on grades, like Finland. Um,
Hmm.
but I feel like our country is very populated and competitive, and I feel like everyone is like basically fighting for college education, for jobs. So there would be like, how would college administrators, how would they assess students and pick who they want to go to their schools, right? So I don't know how that would work. Um, But maybe if there was some sort of like a final exam or just like a few exams throughout the year instead of just having like every single thing that we do graded, maybe that would be a better system. And also, colleges would be able to assess who they want to take into their colleges.
What role do you think parents or family plays in this? Because I think before we get to school, that expectation starts at home as well. Because I think that if you were to all of a sudden come home and be like, you know what, I don't really care about my grades so much. I'm going to bring home all kinds of, failing grades. I don't think any or most parents would be like, okay.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
what role do they play?
So I feel like, especially at a very young age, like in elementary school and early years of middle school, I feel like kids are not really that they don't give much importance to their grades, and that's where parents' roles come into play. Like they want their kids to obviously do well in life, so they think that oh, we have to help our kids get good grades. And a lot of times, I feel like um, some parents kind of take over, so they
Mm,
will almost do their kids like homework for them just because they want them to do well, right?
yeah,
And obviously, like parents want the best for their kids, but I feel like um, if we allow kids to kind of grow on their own and do things on their own,
yeah.
then in general, like we would become better people.
As a student, or whether this year or previous years, that that level of competition and needing to perform has helped or has it hurt relationships?
I feel like going in, so it was a lot different in quarantine because I feel like
Mm,
everyone was just kind of doing their own thing. I feel like everyone's always talking about grades. Like everyone's like, "Oh, what did you get on this test?" Or "I'm super nervous. I want to get an A on this
mhm,
assignment." Right? Everyone's always talking about grades, and there's this kind of um, indirect sense of a competition. Really,
mm,
like no one
yeah,
actually is mean to each other, but we feel like that sense of competition inside, and I feel like that
right.
does definitely affect friendships and relationships. And then in terms of parent relationships, I feel like this is kind of the age where parents start getting a little bit less involved. At least for
Yeah,
me, my parents would help a lot more when I was younger.
right.
But definitely, like in general, like if a kid gets a bad grade on a test, they are obviously they have anxiety to come home and tell their parents, "Oh, I got a bad grade on this test," or they don't want their parents to check Power School and you know.
Yep. So other than parental like consequences or like disappointing your parents, which is huge, we all, most people have some innate sense of wanting to please their parents and make them proud, especially if you're from a certain cultural background. I definitely understand that. But what do you think it is about failure? Because I always think that it's never as simple as what's on the surface, right? So let's say we get a B, like, and then that leads to, for some people maybe that's like insufficient, not good enough, and maybe that means I'm not smart, maybe that means I'm not, like, at the core of it, what do you think the real problem or fear is with failing? Because I'm really trying hard to change the narrative around failing because I actually think it is the best thing that can happen to us.
Hmm.
So what do you think the actual fear is? Like, is it what we think other people will think of us? Is it what we think of ourselves, or something
Yeah, I
else?
think it's just a combination of really what we think of ourselves and just feeling not good enough. Like we
Mm,
always want to feel like we are good enough for this world to, we want to do well in life. We want
yes.
to, have good relationships with people, and we want to feel included and accepted in society. And I feel like um, letter grades can almost just like define our self-esteem because it's just like a number, right?
You think that's accurate? Do you think an A, and if you get all A's, does mean that you are better or smarter
No,
or
it does not. Because I feel like A's are just a reflection of your preparation and
mm,
organization skills. It's definitely not a measure of intelligence. It's not a measure of how you are as a person.
mm.
It's just it's just a letter grade. It's not really a true assessment of who you are.
What do you think it means to be successful in United States of America in 2022? What is success? Because I feel like this is all wrapped up in that too. Because I
Mhm.
think there's a narrative, and I'm not attaching a judgment to that, but I do think there's a narrative that if you get a certain amount of grades and you go to a certain type of school, you get a certain type of job and you make a certain type of money. So I feel like, and status and a job, which of course we want security. Of course we want, to have, comfort in life, as we should, of course, to survive and take care of those we care about. But do you agree with that idea of success? Do you define success as something different? How do you define success?
So I feel like obviously there are a bunch of different definitions, but the most common one is just kind of that, that feeling of security, a good job, a lot of money, a good family. But I feel like success is more how you are as a person, like how you treat others, how you work hard, you're kind, how you improve. And if you're really being your best self, I think that's really success. Because a lot of times things like money and everything could be determined by luck and your own privilege. Like some people are not privileged to live in, like I am privileged. I live my parents are in the middle class. I get to go to school. I have an education,
Right.
right? I have my own room. Like I am privileged, but some people don't have this kind of privilege, and I feel like that can obviously determine how they, how much money they get, or their own education. It could also just, I feel like they have completely different lifestyles and they have different ways of thinking because I feel like we're more driven to kind of just live that comfortable life, whereas they kind of want to get out of any uncomfortable situations that they're in and be their best selves. Or maybe they don't want to. Success can be defined in so many ways, but I think it should be defined by who you are as a person and if you are living life to the best of your ability.
So how do you think we can start this shift of a narrative around failure, especially as a teacher? Like, how do I create opportunities for students to fail? I mean that in a positive way, and to fail and to see that as an opportunity. Because I think, and I know you're very, very young, but you still may have had enough experience. I certainly feel like, looking back, that the times where I was shifted and forced to move forward and change and reflect in a really good way was when things were failing. Whether in my control or out of my control. So how do you feel like we can create more opportunities for students to do that without penalizing them with a grade?
There should be some sort of a particular assignment where the students are assessed multiple times of the year, and really only the last time they take that assessment, or the final time, is the one that counts. Some sort of either like assessment or like a project or something where students have multiple opportunities to keep trying and improving, but then the last one that they do is really the only one that actually has a grade or that counts.
I think that's a really good idea. I think that probably is something I'm sure teachers have thought about. I think we have to be honest, and I say we meaning educators, that sometimes the things that probably need to be done just require so much time and so much work that sometimes maybe it deters us as well. So we kind of go back into what's comfortable for us, because I mean, there are a lot of demands on educators and it takes time. But I think what you're saying makes sense. And I think we do that with certain subjects more than others, like writing. I think that naturally happens when you do multiple drafts of something and then you do editing of it and then you turn it in. So you do get the opportunity to confer with the teacher. But I don't know if that's always true of like a math test or a science test. So what motivated you with this answer? Is this something that you feel like pressure with?
Just something I'm really noticing in general, like, again, just going to school, like everyone's obsessed with grades, and I'm honestly obsessed with grades. Like it's just honestly something normal, I feel like, at this age.
Yeah, it's very normal. And I think what's scary too, though, is I think it's as you get older and look back, you realize how much it's tied into self-esteem. That if I maintain this grade or this level of, coursework, that it must mean something of what I'm worth or how I'm valued, which might very well be true. It's fantastic to feel successful and smart, and we should feel those things, especially if you've worked hard for it. But what do you think the danger is in attaching self-esteem to grades?
So I feel like grades are honestly correlated with perfectionism and just that need to be perfect. And I feel like if we're really used to seeing all A's all the time, and suddenly something, and it doesn't have to be only grade related. Like if we're used to just doing well in everything you do and having good relationships with people, and then suddenly something happens, we won't be able to handle it, right? Whereas if we're taught to use failure as a motivator, and if we are faced with situations where we have to deal with failure a lot more often, then I feel like when it really matters later in life, we'll know how to deal with it and we'll know how to handle it.
When I think of some of the most famous artists and movie stars, I feel like they're all, for the most part, not everyone, of course, but for the most part, people who have come out of some very challenging, circumstances. And it's because they were failing or people around them failed them that they had that real drive and motivation. And I fully believe that motivation comes from that type of challenge. So
yeah, I feel like you have to hit the rock bottom to hit the top. Otherwise, you'll always just be floating in the middle somewhere.
So well said. That belongs on a bumper sticker. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, and what are you going to be singing for us?
All Too Well by Taylor Swift.
I'm going to mute myself just so I don't make any noise.
Okay. I walked through the door with you. The air was cold, but something about it felt like home. Somehow, when I left my scarf there at your sister's house, and you still got it in your drawer, even now. Oh, your sweet disposition, my wide-eyed gaze was singing in the car, getting lost upstate. Autumn leaves falling down like pieces in a place, and I can picture it after all these days. And I know it's long gone, and there's nothing else I could do. Not forget about you long enough to forget why I needed to. Cause there we are again on that little town street. You almost ran the red cause you were looking over at me. Wind in my hair, I was there, I remember it all too well. Photo album on the counter, your cheeks were turning red. You used to be a little kid with glasses and a twin-sized bed. Your mother's telling stories about you on the t-ball team. You tell me about your past, thinking your future was me. And I know it's long gone, and the magic's not here no more. And I might be okay, but I'm not fine at all. Cause here we are again in the middle of the night. We're dancing around the kitchen in the refrigerator light. Down the stairs, I was there, I remember it all too well, yeah. And maybe we got lost in translation. Maybe I asked for too much, but maybe this thing was a masterpiece till you tore it all up. Running scared, I was there, I remember it all too well. Hey, call me up again, just to break me like a promise. So casually cruel in the name of being honest. I'm a crumpled up piece of paper lying here, cause I remember it all, too well.
made you learn that song in particular?
Well, it's just my favorite Taylor Swift song, and I love Taylor Swift. So.
Oh my gosh, I love her too. Well, thank you so much for playing for me. I really appreciate it. I'm always here if you ever need anything. Don't forget.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.